Now it's all over. We are done with Blaster Master. The trilogy is complete, and thus we put an end to this saga. Or do we? Don't get me wrong, but I really like the Blaster Master series. I have fond memories of the 80s when Blaster Master was released for Nintendo. After playing through the latest trilogy, I can now end an adventure that took me several hours to get through. But even though the game series is currently complete, I ask myself if the Blaster Master franchise is over. Will there be anything more? One of Blaster Master's creators, Yoshiaki Iwata, once said that the original game was created by 5 people under his leadership. Over the years, the game series has grown, and with the producer of the Blaster Master Zero series, Matt Papa, the games have developed in a new direction. But everything that is new also has an end. The trilogy is finished, but does that mean that the game series is over? After playing through all the Zero games, I see that there are loose threads that can be picked up and that can give rise to new stories. We are not talking about cliffhangers, but rather about the potential for a sequel to the Blaster Master series, albeit in a completely different era with new characters and new fates. Over a period of 4 years, Inti Creates released 3 Blaster Master games that are partly reminiscent of the game that was once released to the NES system. Among other things, the story is recognizable about Jason following a frog, falling into a hole and discovering a whole new world. The game's producer Matt Papa has said in an interview that it took about 2 years to complete Blaster Master Zero before it was released in March 2017. The similarities between Blaster Master to NES and Blaster Master Zero are striking at times. Just look at how the two games start. When I played Zero for the first time, it felt like nostalgia on a large scale. As if you were back in 1988 when the Blaster Master was released for the first time. Matt Papa has admitted that Zero can be seen as a reboot of the first game, but Zero still stands on its own 2 feet. It feels like a real deluxe variant of the original. New weapons, new worlds, new bosses, and so on. Blaster Master Zero received overall positive reviews, much thanks to the clear retro style and that the game was faithful to the original in design. I personally think it was good to reuse the graphics from the original. It creates a huge charm and helps you recognize the game from old times. In addition, all new IDs have a huge effect. The story is now very big with lots of cutscenes. And above all, the opportunity to be able to save my progress, something that wasn't possible to Blaster Master to NES. Sometimes it is the small differences that make up the whole. And of course, it is not the same game we played in the 80s. But the similarities exist, but now it's more developed. How difficult a game is to cope with obviously depends on how good you are. But I want to remember that Blaster Master to NES was a real challenge. You could eliminate the bosses by cheating, pause and drop a bomb. But overall, it was much more difficult, partly because there was no map system. You had to memorize all the roads so that you found the right path. I also had big problems with coping with the boss in the underwater world. What is consistent with the entire Blaster Master Zero series is that the level of difficulty feels well balanced. Sure, some bosses are extremely easy to handle and have very few mechanics. Other bosses are much more challenging and require you to be focused, otherwise you die. The boss fights are still a big part of the games being fun. I do not want to give up until I have learned how a boss works and I can eliminate it. In terms of difficulty, the bosses in the first Zero game are probably much easier than the bosses you meet in the 2 later games. There is no doubt that the game developers put more effort into making the fights more challenging and complex. The trilogy also has a clear game development. While Zero was like the original, I was very surprised at what was done with the sequel. In my opinion, the second game is the most unique in the game series. Much thanks to how you travel between different planetary systems to make Jason stronger, find improvements to his tank and try to find a cure for Eve, who has been damaged by mutant virus. Blaster Master Zero 2 feels like a game where Inti Creates really took a new direction. Both the first and the third are partly the same. Of course, there are big differences, but the principle of playing different maps and finding portals to move on is what they have in common. Here, the second one stands out and makes the game feel most original in the entire game series. Obviously, there is no lack of creativity in those who developed the game. And if there is no shortage of ideas, why not expand the Blaster Master series even further? Of course, you often know what to expect. Explore a world by driving around in your tank, whip some bosses, find some items that make you better equipped for difficult challenges. And maybe this is where we will find the Blaster Master game of the future. To be able to find unique objects with special properties that allow you to move forward in the game. Of course, new weapons, a new plot, and new bosses. It is up to the game developers if there will be anything more. But why stop now? Blaster Master Zero 3, which is the trilogy's grand finale, not only gives you the answers to the characters' different fates, the game is also the best in the trilogy in terms of game technology and feels most balanced. The ability to warp between different zones, bosses with a well-balanced degree of difficulty, that the game gradually becomes more difficult and complex labyrinths that force one to explore many corners of the game. It's quite interesting to see how much better Blaster Master Zero 3 is compared to Zero 1. It is obvious that the game developers have thought about how to make the next game better, which is also clear. Also, how much cooler Jason looks in his spacesuit compared to the previous games. Matt Papa has said in interviews that the story of Jason is finished. It took over 30 years before we got a resolution and understanding of all the mysteries that have come along the way. The question is then, what comes next? In a way, I feel that Blaster Master is based on the story of Jason. The story and characters are so interconnected with the Blaster Master universe, so I wonder how to proceed. Like removing Superman from the Superman movies. Possibly use one of the other characters that have already been featured. For example, a background story of Leibniz. Or maybe turn everything around and play like a mutant. Or go a whole new line with the next generation Blaster Masters. Something that is hinted at in the trilogy. Anyway, I think we will see more Blaster Master games in the future. It feels undeniably stupid to put an end to a series that has lots of fans all over the world. Matt Papa also does not want to comment on the future of the games. It is shrouded in obscurity, but considering what indie creates come up with and how they managed to shake life in a game series that rested in its slumber, it feels like the game series is alive more than ever. I see no reason to stop now. There are too many fans, but too few Blaster Master games. Only the future can tell if we get to see more game titles. So, what do you think about the future of Blaster Master? Will we get more games? And what direction do you think the game developers will go? Will we see Jason again, or is it time for something completely new? Comment below and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. Have a nice day, peace.